So, digital disruption. I can just about see you all there. I'm Richard Ayres from 7 League, and I'm in moderating mode today, so it's my job to help facilitate the conversation. Let me do a quick poll of the survey, because I haven't been to Soccerex before. So, who in the audience is from the football business specifically? Stick your hand up, please. Yeah, oh, okay, all right. And who would count themselves as being more sort of media as opposed to football business, either media business? Okay, so even spread. One of the things that we're going to talk about, OTT, which covers a multitude of sins, but a whole bunch of technologies, a whole bunch of sort of media dynamics. And as a group, I would like to keep a sort of high level on the conversation as we possibly can. So there may well be stuff that we come across where you think, I have no idea what they're talking about, in which case that's fine. You can grab one of us afterwards or grab me or something, or look it up, Google it. But our intention is, because we've got such a great panel of really interesting businesses and indeed personalities, that it'll be good to dig into that. So let me introduce, starting at the far side, Paul Richard Eyes. That's a new one. Normally it has an R in it, but quite flexible. I've been disrupted, you see. Starting from that end of the table, we have Gordon Scher from Tencent. Then we have James Rushton from DAZN. Gareth Capon from Gabio, and Jerry Newman from Facebook. And we're not going to go through each one of their products and services and work out what they are, because that you really can look up. Let me contextualize just for a second. If we're talking about disruption and media disruption, if you're looking in the Western world in particular, you want to look for an early case, the earliest case study, to see how the flow of this kind of thing goes. You need to go back to about 1440. I haven't gone mad. Gutenberg's printing press was the point at which the business of taking 6 months or a year or 2 or 5 to make the Book of Kells and do Bibles that were incredibly, beautiful, but could only be done by 3 monks sitting in a room for a very long period of time. Gutenberg's printing press completely democratized the ability to be able to take that information and disseminate it. And that fundamentally is exactly the same that's been happening now, and it's been happening particularly in the last 50 years. Whether that be the ability to record music and then broadcast it over radio so you didn't have to be in the room to hear the person play that song, or whether it be music industry, or whether it be the film industry, in which case you're sort of accelerating all the time. My own background originally was journalism. BBC News launched 20 years ago today. I was on the launch team for 20 years ago. We launched the BBC News online website. And the news industry, completely changed. The value and power of newspapers completely changed. And that is happening sector upon sector upon sector. So the question is, how do you adapt? And our question today, of course, is disruption and value of broadcasting rights. What will be the broadcasting rights? You will have noticed, we don't have a broadcaster on the panel. We don't actually have anybody really from traditional media side on the panel. So from that point of view, you've got 5 nerds. I hope you don't mind that being. I see that as a hat tip. Okay, good. 5 geeks who can talk about the extent to which they're seeing that digital disruption have its impact on the sporting sector, and in particular football. So, where to start? Jerry, start me off, because just 2 days ago, Real Madrid put out a long-form video, and it's the beginning, or is it the beginning of a new way of Facebook handling its media?
Yeah, to elaborate a bit more, we launched a new platform called Watch. It's a surface that sits on the inside of Facebook, and it's designed to host episodic content that allows deeper engagement within communities. Hala Madrid was the episodic documentary that's been created by Madrid, which gives people an insightful look behind the scenes of the football club. For us, looking at Real Madrid, a football club with over 100 million followers globally, I think it's a great opportunity for those guys to continue to sort of lead the way in their adoption through technology and test out this new surface first. And at this early stage, their idea was to develop a series to give people a deeper look inside the club using GoPro as a production technique. There's a number of other services that have already started to use this platform, particularly not just in sport, but on other areas, where they're trying to meet this brief of episodic content that engages a community. It's early days, but we're seeing some really exciting results. I think that what we're trying to do is really help these guys that are jumping on the platform to understand why our platform's different. You know, we're not a traditional OTT service, we're not a broadcaster, we're something very different. And in order to really unlock the power of that community, to help create and engage with that content and sometimes curate that content, you really have to appreciate the way in which fans interact with content on Facebook.
Okay, you're seeing fan interaction happening in a very different mode, sort of constant consumption, bite-sized chunks, that kind of thing. Gordon, talking about Tencent, and now you have so many things that are different in terms of the environment, but that consumption of short-form video, is that something that is fundamental to the Chinese user's experience?
Yes, it is. I just want to add a few things about what Richard said. Among us, 5 of us are there. We are all from the digital. We are not broadcaster. But for Tencent, it's a little bit different because in China, internet business is a traditional business. So from that perspective, I would say Tencent is also a traditional player. So back to the Richard's question, we talk about whether Chinese consumer like the short video stuff. And meanwhile, definitely Tencent is doing a lot of short videos, but meanwhile, Tencent is also a broadcaster for a lot of sports rights. For example, the English Premier League, for example, NBA. And I believe those kind of a short video and the broadcasting, they're enhancing each other. I'm gonna use an example is that for last season, the NBA season, we distributed tens of billions of a short video of the NBA games. And there's totally 500 million people watch those kind of short video. But in terms of live broadcasting, they also have 1 to 200 millions of Chinese users. They watch the live broadcasting game. So I think those kind of two formats, they're really helping each other. And by the way, last season, by using those kind of short video kind of thing, and also when we have a more short video, we engage more and more casual fans into hardcore fans. We actually double the total viewership of the short video. And comparing with last season, we have the 4 times of the growth. So I think those kind of two formats definitely are gonna helping each other, make each other bigger and bigger.
And in your world, you've got 2 traditional industries, traditional broadcast and traditional digital in a way, and those rights are kept totally separate, right? They're not, the deal is done with CCTV for the mainstream broadcasting, and then you'll take the digital rights, and then are you being disrupted by other people? There must be people who are doing, what happens with them? Who's disrupting you?
Yeah, we are trying to disrupt ourselves. So that's why we put a lot of efforts on the short video thing, so we can enhance this stuff. And there's some, we call it traditional, but we still have some new technology on that, behind that. For example, we know that what kind of consumer group, they watch those short video, and they basically watch it 2 or 3 times, then we will assume those guys are really probably have some interest on that sports. And based on those big data behind all the consumer behaviors, we know who they are, so we can push some specific message to them. For example, maybe 5 minutes before the live broadcast game, we tell them, hey, the next game is gonna be Chelsea versus Manchester United. Maybe the guy never watched the live broadcasting game of English Premier League, but if the guy watches 3 times of the short video, we assume this kind of a short message push on the right time, 5 minutes before the real broadcasting game. They're gonna help them to transfer them, to cultivate them to be a hardcore fans. This is what we are doing. So we are disrupting ourselves.
There's a phrase that some of my colleagues often use, which is those who understand the audience most will dominate the market. And I think that sort of audience data, I mean, Gareth, with your product, when you use, a lot of people use Grabio, and they're using it to manipulate video, a lot of short form clips. I think Wimbledon's one of you, there's a whole series of things. What's the data that you're getting on the audience whilst you're doing that? Is that as valuable, as important to you as it is like how you're actually being able to produce and output the media itself?
It depends. I mean, I think that depending on where you're distributing the content to and the videos to, dictates how much information you'll get back from those platforms. It's quite clear to people in the industry that if you put your videos on your own platform, your own website, your own applications, you are going to get more data than putting it on Facebook or Twitter or WeChat or any of the other third-party platforms. The trade-off is probably scale in terms of audience and consumption and the ability to reach both existing fans and new fans on those platforms. So I think that's for people that use Grabio, that is an ongoing debate really. How much of this, the content, the value in your rights, do you own yourself, knowing that you own the data and potentially the monetization options around that, versus going for a much broader opportunity with an audience, but understanding that the data you're going to get back is not going to be as rich.
Yeah. Do you find that when you get rights holders coming to you, there'll be different types, but some of them must come with like long lists of data they would like to get back, please. And I bet others come with almost nothing at all. Do you see that kind of pattern?
I think we're still in a stage where it's still a lot that's driven by the content experience. Most people are saying we know there is demand for different types of content on these various platforms. It's driven by mobile, it's driven by growth of social networks. So there's still a huge amount of people still at stage 1 or stage 2 saying we need to be better at putting the content where our audience are or our new fans may be, making it in a format that they want to watch it. And from that, we then need to work out how that plays into the rest of our rights relationships, how that trades off against TV and these other things. And that definitely is not, it's an ongoing debate and will be for some time. But I think that the second stage of that, people will start to get smarter about the way that they use data. And I think there are opportunities to use data in a really smart way across both your own platforms and the third-party platforms too. But you need to think about the data in a slightly different way. It's not just about ownership. It's actually about the exploitation of what that is and how you think about those different audiences. Yeah,
you can have a data lake, but if you don't know what to do with it, that's what's the point. Yeah. James, you've got a platform, and it seems to be growing very nicely. Tell me about the data that you've got and about the value, because you've invested quite significantly in some rights. You can mention some of those, but you must be balancing that against the understanding that you've got of the audience and the ability to be able to monetize it. So how important is data for you in that?
It's really important, and it's actually important right at the start. So obviously you talk about some of the rights that we acquire, and we sort of focus on data insights right from the start. So who and what we're trying to buy is based on a whole range of data, some from social platforms, some from our own platforms that the Perform Group own, and we touch over 100 million sports fans a month through our own platforms. And so that sort of, it's very interesting. You walk into a media business or 10 years ago, and there's a bunch of rights traders talking about gut feel and what the rights went for last time around, and 30, 40, 50, 60. Now you walk into sort of what DAZN's doing. It's a bunch of data scientists analysing both the regression modelling on what subscribers are doing and are they actually watching what they come in to buy for, but also from the start what it's actually been interacted with in social platforms, and what does that mean from a pay point of view from a platform like ours. So without that sort of data heart to our business, we wouldn't have a business. It's literally that important.
It's Moneyball for rights.
It is, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good. That's probably been said before, but it sounds good to me. I'll go with it. Gordon, in your world, it's a little bit different because the data understanding you have lots of, but you were talking to me before about the way you make decisions about rights, right? It's very straightforwardly return on investment. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, it's very tough, frankly speaking. China, a lot of their price sometimes is incredibly high. In Tencent's perspective, we are looking at a sustainable business model. So we are going to make sure, even we lose a little bit of money, but that kind of a loss should be in the next few years with the growth of the fan base. We want to get the money back. At least, it's a break even, or maybe we willing to lose a little bit, maybe 10% or whatever. So I think the right stuff is tough, and we want to build it as a sustainable business. So we are very cautious to get the rights to make sure we are going to not lose a lot of money. But when we get the rights, we still take a little bit of risk. When we get it, we still put a little bit more kind of a premium based on the current fan base. But we believe that with kind of the combination of our product, for example, the social product like Facebook, and the news product like BBC kind of news, and also the video product like the Netflix. So combine those products together based on the big data behind. We can really identify those consumers' behavior. We are gonna reach them at the right behavior at the right time. So we're gonna transfer them to be from a non-sports fans to a casual sports fan, and finally to a hardcore sports fan. They're gonna spend money. They're gonna buy the membership.
Exactly, and I think a lot of the work that we do is not necessarily on the top tier of rights. You know, we acquire primary top tier rights, and guess what? If you buy J League in Japan, you're going to get a few subscribers. Pretty obvious stuff. What I think we're talking about in the green room before, where the sort of the data analysis comes in, is the halo effect of those rights. If you buy, we have the J League broadcast in Japan. If you buy J League in Japan, what does that do to your ability to acquire fans of football on La Liga or Liga or Serie A or Premier League? What does it do to Eredivisie? What does it do to Chinese Super League, Korean League? And actually, you can map that. Yeah. Now, of course, you have to, and you build that into your model, and you build it into your acquisition costs. So the acquisition of a primary, the same as you, a primary league like EPL or NBA or, in our case, the J League in Japan, is not necessarily on what the J League alone will bring. It's the halo effect it will have.
So on one hand, you're looking at these as almost a portal offering. You're aggregating. You need a selection of services, and what value is there in the interplay when you look at the bundle. But does that also mean that the rights holders, you're looking at them in a, well, how much do you want to expand in my market? Right? If you need a delivery mechanism to an audience, and I've got the audience, actually that's part of the negotiation, isn't it?
Well, Gordon's probably a better place to say. I mean, I'd like to say that. Yeah, obviously only been going a year, so
give it time.
The audience isn't the same as Gordon.
If the Premier League wants to expand into China, part of their
expecting Tencent to spend, or the Premier League they're going to spend.
Isn't that part of the balance? Is they need to realize that to get to the audience that you have, they need to.
Yeah, I would say it's a very big years, because all those kind of foreign sports rights for Chinese consumer, with the huge potential of the consumer base growth, there's a lot of opportunity if we spend some little money behind those rights after we acquire the rights. And for example, these I'm just going to use the NBA as an example. 2 years ago, when we got it, and we operated 1 year with those kind of engagement power, because we have the social platform. It's so powerful. We can engage those kind of fans, and we also put a lot of efforts on this production capability. And we try to make sure our broadcasting, this visual quality, everything streaming is going to meet this world-class quality. And we learn a lot from ESPN, our fellow partners. So after 1 season, the fan base actually doubled, and the viewership at 4 times of the previous year. So I think those kind of investment is definitely worth behind these acquisition costs.
And sorry to add to that, and I think that's why Gordon's saying, when you're making these type of investments, you're looking for them to be as long term as possible, because part of these type of investments, it's actually not just about growing the subscriber base. It is growing what we call active fans into loyal fans, and how you take them on that journey. And that's one of the reasons why we invested with the J League in Japan, because it was a 10-year deal, and we knew that we could afford to take our time, invest in the sport, from grassroots through to the actual physical quality of the production, and over time grow an audience. And we're starting to see some green shoots there. I mean, the J League attendances at stadiums have gone up 15% in the last 12 months. It shows that if you invest in a sport and invest in the quality of the output, you will get rewards. But it's hard to do it if you're doing it on a 3 or 4 year cycle. Hence why we like long deals.
The cycle is very important.
Yeah,
we talked before the panel that for some of the sports, right, we only got it like 1 day before the real game starts. There's no time for a broadcaster to plan some good marketing investment on that. So those kind of stuff, it will be a very big, it's not very ideal for those fan base growth. We cannot do anything on that, so grow the fans, and especially whatever those kind of rights, they're foreign IP, and the competition is so strong. with this La Liga and the English Premier Liga. There's a huge opportunity there, but competition also very strong. So very well planning, a sustainable long-term partnership will be definitely help a lot.
So Jerry, coming back to Facebook's experience of this, you've got the data. You have, I would say, flirted with some rights. Some of the large, we had the Rooney game. You had to sort of. There have been statements from Facebook about we're not getting involved in this at all, and then there've been some moves that are clearly a bit more committed. And it's kind of where is it currently? Because people must ask you all the time, like, when are you going to buy rights? And
Yes, it's the loaded question that we always get asked. I mean, we have had a number of partnerships in the US. We've done partnerships with MLB, probably one of our, from a football perspective. We also work with Univision and Liga MX. And it's very much of a case of we need to learn. So we have a new surface, and we're preparing for new surfaces, which we were with those deals. So we needed to educate the broadcasters. How do they sort of adapt to this new environment, and how do you change your content? And yeah, that is the most valuable thing for us, is not only learning about how we better work with our partners and how they better use our platform, but also trying to create habit. You know, the episodic approach to watch is really important, because we want people to know that sort of, if you imagine news feeds very much a push type of thing. You open up news feed, you don't know what you get, but the algorithm's going to serve you something, and guess what? It's really, really interesting. But you've also almost subscribed to another pieces of content on watch, and that pulls you in, so you know what you're going to get. And these things take time. But you know, the feedback we've got from the likes of Liga MX, from MLB, has been great. And I think certainly the one thing that stands out for me is CrossFit. These guys are loving the way that they've been adapted to the platform. They're expanding what they're doing. They've had their live events on our platform. And it's fascinating, because they're a league, and it's set, and they're going direct to consumer. And it's not just about the ability to play out those live events. It's every part of their business that benefits from this as well. So, you know, the funnel conversion is going to constantly be talked about, and the ability to be able to take someone who's a viewer, or to start cluster audiences of viewers, and then get them to do an action. So whether it is buy a ticket, or, you know, DAZN's case, you know, it would be how do we upsell subscribers, or how do we take our existing subscriber base, put them onto Facebook, so that we reduce churn by getting those guys to engage with our content on a regular basis. So the opportunities are endless, and certainly from a data point of view, I think that the amount of data that we can provide in an audience is kind of is incomparable to other platforms, and distribution also helps. So much to Gareth's point, you know, you get that breadth of an audience, and you get to really drill down into that. But it's funny, I listen to the data piece. Sometimes we have questions, and it's like people are very interested in the data, and the first question is, can you give us like a menu of all the data that's available? That is that, first of all, you know it's the wrong question, because you don't know what you're trying to achieve. You know, the question should be, I want to do this. You know, we got some great case studies with the Miami Dolphins, where they created a whole content series for their sponsorship program. So they were creating videos on a regular episodic basis to warm an audience, and then taking that audience, then creating a bespoke video, which was very heavily intertwined with the sponsor. They got all that data, and they knew that was something that they could actually put a media value to, and then serve their sponsors better. That's the right approach. I think knowing what you want, and you know, certainly from a Facebook point of view, we can serve that.
If we look at the paradigm of music and watching how they adapt, you had iTunes came out, and everybody was, and then people reserved their archives, and then some dabbled in it, and it took a while for the momentum to come, for people to go, oh yeah, look, clearly, okay, the album is broken down. There were only ever 2 tracks that were any good on that 11-track album anyhow, so that's fine. We'll just sell those 2, and the music industry changed. Of course, it took some years before Spotify came out, and you got a subscription package, very similar to your model in some ways. Yeah. And then, of course, eventually the Beatles put all their tracks. You remember that there was this wait of like, when are the Beatles? I think AC/DC still aren't on. There's some people who are still holding back. Are we seeing in sport the case where all the little guys who are agile, or who can't get on TV, and so they need to be able to think about disruptive platforms, they're doing it, they're charging ahead, they're adapting, they're changing, they're learning, and the big guys are sitting back. They're the sort of, I get sort of last golden goose in the shop. They're sat back, and they're waiting until the right moment. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see that, you know, whenever, if you were to speak to any of the big major rights holder out there, their media investment and what they get from it is a huge amount of their revenue. So you have to be very careful. And, you know, I think speaking to a lot of them, talking about where we're going, they understand that. And a lot of the top leagues do, but, you know, you've got a number of shareholders you have to keep happy, and they're looking at how they can get as much revenue in order to make them the most competitive on the field. So I respect that. And I think
you could break out territories and do unsold rights in particular territories and try stuff, right?
I think that's a great point, and we're seeing that a lot at the moment. I mean, the ICC, they went live in subcontinental Europe with the cricket, and some of the dwell time around that was just amazing. We're seeing, most recently, the US PGA Tour, you know, something that was traditionally on Sky, who, interestingly enough, from a niche basis, decided that it probably didn't make good business sense for them to continue that deal, go direct to consumer on Facebook. You know, and that was a really different experience in the UK, which was traditionally from a broadcast perspective. But the value they got back was huge. You know, golf, traditionally a sport that's consumed and played by an older generation and always having challenges engaging a younger audience, managed to pretty much half their average audience that they were engaging with and play out to a new audience on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's funny, you talk about disruption. There's two types of disruption. There's the people who anticipate it and take the risks and say, actually, I know this is coming in 5 years. And, you know, the music industry is a good case study of that.
Yep.
And then there's the others who kind of say, you know, let's just see how much I can squeeze out of this and then wait for it. And then disruption changes you. So I think that, you know, we'll see what happens. But certainly from our point of view, we're there with broadcasters, rights holders, leagues. We're helping them understand what they're trying to achieve and seeing how Facebook can support that.
It's one of the things we often advise CEOs. If you're looking at the, you know, how are we digitizing our rights and how should we be trying stuff, one of the things you need to take into account is how are your sales team remunerated and how old are they and close to retirement? Because there are a number of cases where I know absolutely that the boss guy of sales has no desire to do a digital deal at all because he's out of there by the time the next rights are done anyway. So. Talking about educating, sponsors need educating. You deal with a bunch of that world. What's your view on sort of the extent to which sponsors need the data, want the right? How do they put the valuation on this stuff?
I think there's obviously demand from a sponsor and a brand point of view to access a broad range of, we were talking about sport, a broad range of audience in sport, and obviously those audiences are not necessarily watching everything on a traditional linear TV platform now. They may not be going to games. They're certainly spending much more time on phones, you know, on social platforms, etc. So there's clearly demand there. But at the same time, you're right. You have to think about, in the same way you talked about helping the right sort of thing about what your objectives. I think it's exactly the same for the sponsors. The sports industry needs to probably be better, I would say, and more broadly think about what a brand really wants. It's not about badging up an event digitally. I think that's not necessarily the right answer. It's about thinking, how do we help our brand partners to activate their campaigns to reach the audiences they want to through our sport, which should touch a whole range of platforms. And actually, I think the opportunity is much better now than it was 5 or 10 years ago, because you've got, you've got direct relationships between you, a rights holder or a club, with your fans in a way that you didn't have before through broadcast. You've got a multi-regional, if not global, relationship with that audience potentially, depending on what type of sport you are, what type, you know, certainly talking about football and Premier League, La Liga, etc. You've got these global audiences you can tap into. And thirdly, you can now have, you know, you've got this new inventory that's being created all of the time that you can take direct advantage of if you think about the specifics of what the audience actually want. And I think it was interesting what you said earlier, Jerry. I think there is a challenge in sport with you talked about optimizing a video content experiences for Facebook, let's say. That isn't easy when you're talking about live sport. There is really one host broadcast. There's stuff you can do around the edges. There's lots of things you can do behind the scenes, on the edges, around the sport. There's specific clips you can create. You can optimize that. But you can't change the live sport that much unless you're talking about creating new sports from scratch. There is only so much you can do with the Champions League final or the test at Lord's, whatever it may be. And I think that's the core point. I agree to an extent your point about disruption. But if I'm a rights holder and my revenue stream is based on generally the broadcast deals that I'm going to do over the next 3 to 5 years, I've got to be careful not to disrupt them because they're 90+% of my revenue. So for us, we work with a lot of rights holders to say, I think there's a lot more value that can be unlocked. It doesn't necessarily mean throwing the baby out of the bath. You don't need to just blow up your broadcast and linear deals to do this. But actually, if you look at the rights that you own, there's probably much more opportunity out there now to do more on Facebook and on Twitter and on WeChat and on DAZN and with sponsors if you think about your rights differently, if you get away from this mindset of saying that I sell my rights to a broadcast every 3 years and I go away.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think Gareth's right. One of the experiences we worked with earlier this year was with BT and the NBA. So when they had the London Games, the NBA are one of those forward-thinking organisations who have a feed specifically built for mobile. So when it is published for someone consuming it on that device. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to watch a live feed of a football game on that device. If you take even the graphics in, you can't even see what the scores are. So I think, Gareth's right, but I think there are opportunities where you can try different things. And going back to your point about the bigger fish and the minnows, the things that's exciting for me is because it's been democratized, the ability to publish, there's new sports that are coming about.
Yep.
If you think about it, it's like the top 2% of football rights or sports rights, those premium ones. Then the bottom of the funnel is that everything's available. We've seen stuff like, tag as a sport now.
Yeah.
That's getting created. And these guys are getting 2 million views by creating a new concept. There's different formats of the game. We had 3 versus 3 here happening yesterday.
Yeah.
I think it's terribly exciting. But, I think that it's about finding that balance. I think you shouldn't be too rigid if you're a top company. If someone like the NBA can start to explore. Don't you rely on one international feed. But these guys at the bottom, they have no legacy.
Yeah.
All they have is opportunity. I think it's a very exciting time for sport.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, there's a tendency to think about English Premier League, and when are they going to, and all that sort. It's like, okay, don't worry, that's the Beatles. That's all right. Just leave them be. When the timing's right, when they're not, when there isn't a threat, they'll move. But actually, in the meantime, there's a truckload of other things coming through and growing. Yeah, couldn't agree. The engagement factor, James, engagement super important. Important for your metrics. Important for understanding the value. Important for the sponsors, I guess.
Well, DAZN is ad-free, so sponsor-free. So it's not particularly important advertising as we had, but it's vitally important for churn.
Yeah.
I mean, unsurprisingly, if people don't watch, they tend to not want to carry on subscribing, even if the value proposition is pretty strong. And I think a couple of things. First of all, you can't underestimate the importance of tentpole properties. So, and I do think you have to tip the hat to the major rights holders, and they are experimenting. They are taking risks. UEFA and the guys at Team sold us and Sky the Champions League broadcast rights in in Germany and Austria, taking it off free to air for the first time. That's a rights holder that is willing to trust what the information that they're seeing in the market, and also what fans are telling them. If you look at some of the stats that we're showing with our rights holders in terms of our guaranteed audiences, kind of comparing that with traditional pay TV, we are ranking bigger audiences, more engaged audiences, better dwell time. So engagement is really important.
How are you measuring engagement?
We measure engagement through a range of proprietary tools. I mean, the big factor we care about mostly is in terms of what drives churn and churn suppression is number of hours.
So minutes watched.
Yeah, minutes watched.
Yeah.
And we have I won't say the number, but we have a very definitive cliff.
Go on then.
That basically, if we can't get people to watch X amount of hours per month, they are 3 times more likely to churn. So a lot of our work in terms of engagement is based on trying to drive that watching habits, and that's not through necessarily our own platform. That's then working with social platforms and with Grabia to create content that actually entices through programmatic media people to remind them, to Gordon's point, there's a game on now, or remind them that if you're time shifting in Japan, that last night's Serie A or last night's La Liga content is now live down. Watch it now on your way to work. That type of stuff is really important because it's not opinion based. Going back to the data science point, it's absolute black and white. Unless we get them to view X amount of hours, they are 3 times more likely to leave the business.
That's still relatively passive consumption, right? I mean, it's still kind of engaging. Gordon, I'm particularly thinking about WeChat, but also your other applications as well. The timing means that most of the European sports, for example, or the NBA, are being consumed, if live, in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So it's a different user behavior because you're you're watching at a different time. But are you also interacting? Is there more interaction? Is there more chat? Is it more of a social consumption pattern?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting about those broadcasting time. And you know, some of the elements sometimes are better for the internet platform. For example, we talk about the NBA. It's in the morning. So at that time, a lot of commuters, they're on the way, they're in the metro, and some of them, they come into the office and have some early meeting. But for those guys, they can definitely watch the NBA, the live broadcasting via their mobile device. So at that perspective, we take the advantage versus the traditional media. They're gonna no way to watch the TV at home, so they have to do it on the way. And on that, back to the topic of the engagement, we create a lot of social content for our Chinese fans, make them to, we romanticize their experience of watching a game in the metro. We sometimes we can feature a social picture talking about a guy is buying the breakfast before he get on the train. He said, hey, give me 1 egg because my favorite team is gonna have a match today. So we create those kind of social stuff. People is gonna, wow, this is something we are gonna do. And we also, sometimes we featuring a very shitty taxi, a very old car. You imagine those China, it's like 30 years ago in Africa or whatever. You just, the guy is a very shitty car, but he say, we providing NBA streaming service on my car. So those guys can bring the people to the office as a commuter in third-tier city, fourth-tier city. So those kind of interaction, we can romanticize the experience. So they're gonna go back to watch the game more and more frequently. So this is very interesting for the fans.
Yeah.
We create some stuff, experience.
Thank you. The interaction point, to what degree is that of value when you're trying to weigh up the importance? It's not, is it just like minutes watched, that's all that really counts? Or is it about comments and shares and interaction and all those other elements?
Certainly for us, they're all important triggers that allow your video content to get more reach. So if you're a sports publisher, you may have a fan base of 4 million. If your content is good enough, it can reach way beyond that audience. And that's all about the triggers that are picked. So it's the amount of time that someone's spending on that clip, it's the reactions, it's the shares, it's the comments. All these factors are really important. And I think that's why when you're creating content, it has to be quality content. There is obviously the fight for attention, which is always growing, and there's also the thirst for consumption. So I think there's this challenge between making sure you're producing good content that says all the right triggers, and that's again talking about how you socially integrate that into your content, and the second time about keeping up with volume. It's a very competitive world out there. It's not just the other sports that you're fighting for attention with, it's other forms of entertainment and media.
Yeah. If you go quiet for a week, I mean, how long do you have to go quiet for it to have a negative impact? I mean, when you're advising people, like, don't go quiet for 2 days or 2 weeks or...
It's, there's no doubt that I think we were, during the end of the football season, there's then generally a natural sort of reduction in publishing, and we would sit down and advise our partners on different forms of content you can create which don't involve talent. And we're on the edge of that. We know that if we can spot something, we can look at data and go, we might see something coming here, guys, let's help you get through that. But it is certainly important to keep up with that cadence. Otherwise, there will be something else that fills that void of attention for that consumer.
So it sounds like if you're a rights holder, it's going to be important that you have somebody in your team working closely with your sales team, I guess, or your commercial director, in order to be able to inform them about the data understanding of the digital usage behavior. Because if you can't analyze the impact effectively of, and understand where you sit in the marketplace, your pricing of your digital rights, you won't be able to work out how that fits alongside your broadcast rights, or indeed whether there's any line between the two at all. Right? A, would you agree, Gareth, would you agree? And B, what are those keys to success for a rights holder if they're trying to sort of adapt in this world?
Well, starting with pricing, it's incredibly hard. I mean, even going back to traditional TV and linear pricing valuation of rights, there's some science and some art, in that world, let's just say. But I think that when you're looking at, what's the value of a like or a share or a comment or a social video, it is difficult. You need comparables. You need to look at traditional media outlets, or from a brand perspective, what you would be spending to get the same to get to that audience, let's say on Facebook as an example, versus what you may do through a sports partner or a rights holder. So those things, I think, give you some reference points. But certainly, one thing we're pretty confident about seeing it through, even just through the Grabio platform, the amount of time, to James's point earlier, of time spent on video, watched, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on mobile generally, is so much bigger, I think, than people recognise from a sort of the traditional media landscape. And it isn't directly comparable to TV, and it is a slightly different medium. And yes, the watch time per user may be different, but when you sort of add that up and you look at the actual amount of time that's being consumed, that is measured. It isn't a non-measurable product. There are lots of TVs that are on. They may not necessarily be watched, and you get into this very existential discussion about what watching really is. But I think that this is the point: is that we just tend to follow the trends and say, well, what's going up? Video is growing. Mobile and smartphone penetration is growing everywhere. The bandwidth available to those devices is growing. The ability to take that same content into every platform, be that a smartphone, a tablet, a television, is also growing. And if you play that forward, you say that in the end, this is about what we're talking about really is just the way that people consume content is a word I hate, but certainly the way people watch video is going to continue to change, and it isn't about any one specific platform. It's about looking at the behavior that people actually what do they actually want? How do they want to watch things? Where do they want to watch it? How much do they want to pay for it? And therefore following that trend and making your investments on that basis. Because I do agree with Jerry saying that you are competing for attention with lots of different things. It's not just sport, it's movies, it's YouTubers, it's fashion, it's all of these other things which are now so much more available to any given consumer than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And therefore, if your content isn't available, you do risk being forgotten about, particularly with people who may be growing up with a totally different view about what media consumption looks like.
So when, put my broadcast rights traditional media hat on for a second, when I say, yeah, but my rights deals are 5 years long and I'm about to redo them and they're going to run till, or in some cases like 8 or more, and the numbers are so significant compared to some vague revenue you're vaguely promising me on a model that's probably going to check. Like, what's your argument against that?
The music industry. Go back 15 years, that was exactly, I spent some time working in the music, that was exactly what the conversation around CDs. And it was a 15+ year cycle, and now for the first time, subscription-based revenues from the music industry are growing, and they're now the sort of dominant part of the music industry, which is now growing again. But it's gone through a total transformation of its business, and I think and that was the same argument. And we certainly wouldn't make recommendations to rights holders to throw away their broadcast revenue rights, but just recognise that the dollars will always follow the consumption in the end. So if the consumption changes, then the money will change. Whether that's 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 or 15 years is a harder question to answer.
And I don't think sometimes it's about enabling your partners. So we had James's example was great. Team and UEFA enabled DAZN as a publisher. Traditionally it was like, we sell to broadcasters.
Yeah.
And in the days where you used to cut rights up in terms of that's a mobile deal, that's a web deal, that's a broadcaster deal, and then everything's sort of becoming self-involved. It's about enabling those guys. And we sit down and work with rights holders and say, look, enable your partners.
Yeah,
There's a lot of inventory that goes in. I mean, you guys have a lot of inventory, and there might be something where you go, actually, we can afford to try something different.
Yeah, and also, I think sometimes the sort of OTT seen a little bit more nascent than it is. I mean, you're absolutely right. Sort of Team and UEFA enabled us, and it's fantastic to be working with them. But they made us pay a pretty penny for those rights. It's not a case of digital subscription services or any of our businesses are asking for crumbs off the table. We're pretty comfortable and confident with the models that we have, with the revenues that we can generate. The challenge is when we launched in all our markets last year, we had 0 subscribers because we're brand new, and so obviously we were looking to sign. Look back to the point, you're looking to sign deals with partners that are ideally multi-year, so you have an opportunity to build up your revenues, build up your subscription base before going into a sort of renewal cycle on those rights. Now, some rights holders can do that, some rights holders can't, but I think I wouldn't want anyone in the room to think that the sort of digital OTT or whatever we're calling these type of revenues are in any way, shape or form sort of ancillary to their broadcast revenues. As we've shown, the broadcast and also Tencent and Gordon have shown the revenues that we can put down and the guarantees we can put down are significant.
Gordon, to what degree is it about that dynamic of the valuation of the rights and how, as Gareth was saying, how the market will play itself out?
Yeah, I think we are looking at a long-term value of that. We definitely have some monetization kind of target, and we believe that with the entire platform, we can grow the fan base, and we can also increase the frequency. And we can also, by increasing our commercialization capability, to make sure we maximize the monetization from all those commercial partners, like Coca-Cola, like McDonald's, those kind of things. So we are looking at the entire contract period. And after the period, definitely we need to have a number as a break even or whatever. We got some very minimal profit. That would be the best scenario. So yeah, this is the situation.
Great. We're going to wrap up in a section. I'm not sure whether you want to go to questions. I'm looking to the back of the room. We have a microphone. Should we do one or two? It's always nice to hear from. Right, there's got to be some experts out there in the room. Anybody got a question that they would love to put to one of these gentlemen? Oh, one down the front, please. Mr. Croker, the microphone's coming. I think they're streaming, so let's do the mic.
Thank you. Just with this, with the whole new world of OTT and new methods of delivering, we still seem to be doing this on the old-fashioned geographical basis. How far away are we from somebody saying, actually, I'm not going to sell my rights. Somebody is globally going to buy a sports event or a series of sports event and not broadcast it, but transmit it on a global basis. So when someone going to say, I'm going to buy this 12:30 Premier League match exclusively on a global basis, and if they do, who would do it? Or would they do it themselves as the principal?
Well, I think certainly from a Facebook point of view, we're enabled to do that. So I think from a platform, if someone decided that they wanted to make that investment, or the league decided that they wanted to go direct to consumer on any level of that, they could do so, with the exception of, obviously China. But there's many markets in which we have a very strong audience with. So yes, should a publisher or a broadcaster or a rights holder decide to do that, then the platform's ready.
James, do you have a thought on that one?
Yeah, two thoughts really. I think from a rights perspective, as Andrew knows, there's from a performer group point of view, that's already happening, where there's big deals in the market for WTA for 10 years, FIBA for 17 years, where we sort of control those rights. We're not commercialising those rights globally through DAZN yet, but who knows in the future. I think probably what's the first baby step is probably a pan-regional play. So you'll see OTT coming in to sort of buy rights for the whole of North America, or for the whole of Southeast Asia, or the whole of Central Europe, and start to play it that way. From a platform point of view, obviously, doing it in English is easier. So I think the first steps will be, whether it be DAZN, Facebook, Amazon, whoever, looking to do a pan-regional play, probably in English, and then taking it out from there. But I think platform-wise, it's there now. It just requires someone to sort of have a leap of faith in terms of the commercialization model across that many markets.
Yeah.
We're live in 5 markets now. We'd hope to be sort of double that in sort of the next 18 months. So you can see how DAZN could, in 4 or 5 years, be looking to broadcast in 20 markets and look to take pan-regional risks.
We've been doing a lot of work with UFC over the years, and of course they couldn't get on TV at all in the early days. They had to go direct to consumer with their own products, and did that very, very well. You forward wind that, I think the answer to your question to a degree is WME, IMG, and their acquisition of UFC as a whole. I mean, you had Mayweather McGregor, right? And
yeah, we did. Yeah.
Which was paid, or
no? So that was our first sort of traditional box office event that we put in the platform, and we didn't change anything. It was the proposition was exactly the same. You can come in 1 month trial, leave any time, and that was a really interesting experiment, because we obviously have a cost per acquisition from a trialist point of view. So we decided to flip our marketing money around and actually go for something that would generate trials and interest, both from a brand point of view, but also actual physical, how many people can we get through the door. And it, thankfully, the platform was robust, which is always a slight concern with those big peak events, and the platform worked fantastically well. And the numbers were frightening. They exceeded all our expectations, and so one of my members of staff asked me sort of when I was in Tokyo last week, was it a success? And even if all of those trialists don't ever convert into paying subscriptions, the amount of brand presence broadcasting that event created for us in our markets was worthwhile. And I won't give a number, but literally it's in the hundreds of thousands of buyers we got through, or trials we got through for that one event. And we have some pretty strong boxing on our services, so we're able to then create a narrative to those audiences. Hey, by the way, we've got these 15 key fights coming up the next 6 months. Stay with us as an audience. And so we're pretty hopeful that we'll keep a decent majority of those trialists. But yeah, it was an interesting experiment, something we'll definitely look to do again.
Unfortunately, it reminds me of Radiohead and what they did with Spotify when they came and gone off. But I can't do that because that's comparing McGregor or Mayweather to Radiohead, which is just perverse. No further questions? Any further questions? In which case, oh, no, there is one. No, there isn't one. In that case, I think our time is up. Thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you.